Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Could Narendra Modi's supremacy, by which I mean his personality and his style of governance, threaten India's success? That's one of the key thoughts in a recent essay published by Foreign Affairs, and joining me now to talk about what he wrote and to explain his thinking more fully is the author of that essay, the well-known and highly regarded historian and political commentator, Ramachandra Guha. Ram Guha, in a recent essay you've written for Foreign Affairs, you've identified a contradiction that most people have either not spotted or at least appreciated. You write, the very nature of Modi's authority, the aggressive control sought by the Prime Minister and his party over a staggeringly diverse and complicated country, threatens to scupper India's great power ambitions. In other words, Modi's authoritarian personality and his centralizing style of governance are a threat to India's future. Can you explain that point a little further?
So the key words in the sentences you read out from my article are diverse and complicated. India is not just the most populous country in the world, Karan. It's the most heterogeneous. Heterogeneous in terms of language, religion, caste, political beliefs, cultural beliefs, lifestyles, ecological regimes, and a one-size-fits-all approach or a one leader represents everybody approach is unlikely to unlock the potential, India's economic and cultural and political potential. So Mr. Modi and his party have incrementally in the last decade of their rule adopted in fact, I mean, I'm using the word advisedly, a kind of a bulldozer-like approach to any dissent. You know, the way, bills are rushed through parliament, the conflicts between the center and the state, which you might talk about, the disregard of the interests and rights of religious minorities, linguistic minorities, the creation of a personality cult around the prime minister, where it is said that he and he alone represents this country's past, present, and future. And I think lessons from our past, particularly the period of Indira Gandhi's authoritarianism, but also from around the world, other countries, Putin's Russia is a contemporary example of what happens when you have a cult of personality and a leader who is so arrogant that he brooks no dissent, he brooks even no diversity in thought. And I think that's the kind of concerns that I'm flagging in my article. And I hope they're carefully thought through. They are not, they're based on what I've seen over the last decade. They're based on my understanding of Indian history, of global history. And I think all of us should pay much more attention to them than we do.
As you said, this one-size-fits-all approach is in danger of stifling not just India's diversity, but therefore also its creativity and its potential. But the problem, Ram Guha, is that Modi's strong, dominant personality is hugely popular. And many people say that his centralization of power is what makes his government effective. So are we saying that the very qualities that seem to appeal to the electorate would actually end up becoming an obstacle to India's development? Certainly, the subtitle of your Foreign Affairs piece suggests this. The subtitle is How Modi's Supremacy Will Hinder His Country's Rise.
So it's one size fits all in terms of the BJP's ideology. It's also one person knows all. And not just one person knows best, one person knows all. I mean, I think the fact that Mr. Modi, for example, has not had a press conference in 10 years, does not consult his cabinet ministers, rarely listens to the advice of experts from outside government, shows this. And again, we're just too diverse and complicated to be run in that way. We have to be collaborative, consultative, take people along. And, the figures are extremely misleading. The fact that there may be, if you just look at the economy, which is what the boosters may talk about, there may be 5 or 6% growth, but actually growth in the Modi years has been less than in the Manmohan Singh or Vajpayee years. This is what economists who understand the numbers will tell you. And even what growth has taken place masked a tremendous rise in inequalities. The fact that you have, some people making colossal amounts of money. I mean, not just Ambani and Adani being the most visible examples. So you have a sharp increase in inequality. You have growing unemployment. By one estimate by a serious scholar, 42% of our educated youth want jobs but can't get them. Then you have the environmental crisis, which we may talk about a little later. You have the decline of institutions. You have the weaponizing of, the CD and the ED and the CBI against the opposition. You have the suppression of the press. And all this bodes ill, not just for our democracy, but for our future economic growth. Because a healthy, functioning market economy needs independent regulatory institutions. It needs transparency. It needs trust. It needs the development of skills. And all these are conspicuously lacking in Modi's economic model. So even if you take the economy, and we can talk about politics and society a little later, even if you take the economy as some very reputed economists have argued and demonstrated, the model is deeply flawed.
It's not just that Modi's one-size-fits-all approach, the bulldozer approach, as you called it as well, is stifling India's creativity and potential. You make a further connected and important point in your foreign affairs piece. You say Modi's personality and style of government is jeopardizing a key source of Indian strength, its varied forms of pluralism. You add a principal source of India's survival as a democratic country and of its recent economic success has been its political and cultural pluralism, precisely those qualities that the Prime Minister and his party now seek to extinguish. In other words, the very pluralism that he's straitjacketing, undermining, and seeking to extinguish is the strength of the country. So he's not just stifling the country, he's also undermining its strength.
Yes, I mean, it's what makes India so unique as a democratic experiment, as a national experiment. And that's what the founders recognized, that they did not want to impose one religion, one language, unlike in Pakistan or in Sri Lanka, to give the examples of two neighboring countries. And where that has taken them, the suppression of pluralism, where that has taken them. It was also respect for the rights of the states. It was the nurturing of the independence of institutions, such as the press, the judiciary, the regulatory bodies, the civil services. I come from a family of public servants. And even in my generation, many of my closest friends were public servants. And today, public servants are obliged effectively to take loyalty oaths, not just to the Prime Minister and his party, but to the ideology of Hindutva. I mean, Karan, you come from an army background. And one of the most worrying aspects of recent years has been not just the politicization of the Indian Army, which is completely new in our history, in our independent history, but also the incorporation of select army leaders, generals and admirals, into the Hindutva ideology. So all of this is deeply worrisome, and our strength has been our pluralism, our independence of institutions, our ethos of give and take, listen and learn, take everyone together. That was true of most regimes in the past, except possibly that of Indira Gandhi during the emergency. And of course, Modi has taken it, Indira Gandhi's style of governance a step further, because he's even more authoritarian, even more charismatic. The personality cult is much greater and much more visible, partly because of the use of digital technologies, which Indira Gandhi did not have. And again, I'm a historian. I mean, I know what happens when a leader in any country says that I represent the past, present, and future. Whether it is Mao in China, Mussolini in Italy, Castro in Cuba, doesn't matter if left wing or right wing. This is always the creation of such a colossal personality cult, tied in this case to a majoritarian ideology. Uh, uh, if it persists for 10 or 15 or 20 years, I think that will be the end of the Indian national experiment, as envisaged by our constitution.
We can't say whether it's going to persist for 10, 15, 20 years, but it seems to most people almost certain it will persist for 5 more, because when elections are held in a few weeks' time, the wide held belief is that Modi will not just win, but could very possibly sweep.
Yes.
What's your fear will be the situation we face 5 years from now?
So, Karan, this time, I think the BJP has about 203 seats. 303, I beg your pardon. In 2019, they won 303 seats. In 2014, they won, I think, about 280.
282.
282. So it's likely, as you say, based on the surveys, that they would get again around 300 or a few more or a few less. So
But he's claiming he'll get 370.
That's okay. But anyway, they'll have a comfortable majority in parliament. At the same time, large swaths of India will be outside the ambit of the BJP insofar as their state governments go. All of South India, for example, Bengal, Orissa, the Punjab. And in a piece I've written today in the Telegraph, I talk about this, that if 300, 400 million Indians are ruled by opposition parties that are on a collision course with the BJP-led central government because they feel the central government does not respect and honor economic commitments to them, is patronizing and arrogant towards their cultural and linguistic and literary heritage, what happens then? So, see, 300 seats, you remember Rajiv Gandhi got 400 seats in 1984. By 1986-87, there were protest movements everywhere against him on the lines of caste, religion. There were justifiable claims about his suppression of the press, of his misuse of...
But come back to Narendra Modi. Back to Narendra Modi. If Modi continues for 5 years more, what are your fears, both as a political commentator, but more importantly, as the man who spotted what no one else has spotted before, that Modi's strengths and supremacy could be the threat to India's future? So what are your...
So I think the fault lines that we are currently have visible will intensify. The fault line of a Hindu majority versus a Muslim minority. And by the way, in recent months, you have seen also the demonization of Christians, as in Manipur, and Sikhs, as in the farmers' agitation, by the ruling party and its spokespeople. So it's not just Muslims. So you see an intensification of anger and hatred against religious minorities. So that's the Hindu versus minorities fault line. There's the North versus South fault line, which will also intensify because the 5 southern states, none of them are ruled by the BJP, and they're ruled by a diversity of opposition parties, all opposed to the BJP. Okay. You see a center versus states fault line, which I've talked about in my Telegraph article today. You'll see the state versus the rights of the individual's fault line. That Mr. Modi, with a greater majority or at least a third successive victory, he and his Lieutenant Amit Shah will feel emboldened to further crack down on dissent, to tame the press, to harass independent intellectuals and activists, and to have cases against opposition leaders, none against the BJP, even if BJP leaders are corrupt. You'll also see the intensification of the fault line of humans versus the environment. The savage assault on our environment, leading to all the problems we can talk about.
Let's take all of these fault lines.
These 4 or 5 fault lines that are visible, that have opened up further in these last 10 years, will become even more serious and disturbing.
Let's take those fault lines up one by one. To begin with, there's Modi's attitude to state governments, as you said a moment ago in a piece that you wrote for the Telegraph today, you call his attitude to state governments arrogant, overbearing, indeed authoritarian. You say he's creating conflicts which will persist and perhaps even intensify. And you add, this is not a happy augury for the future of our republic. What is your fear for the future of Indian federalism?
Well, it's again, of course, there have been precedents which are important to recognize and remember. Jawaharlal Nehru's dismissing the communist government in Kerala in 1959, Indira Gandhi's flagrant misuse of Article 356 in her tenure to dismiss state governments not used by the Congress. But now it's a large swathe of India. As I said, the 5 southern states and Punjab are more than 300 million people. And each one of those states is very uncomfortable with the attitude of the center, what they see as discriminatory policies, what they see as shockingly partisan governance, and we can name them, Arif Muhammad Khan in Kerala, R.N. Ravi in Tamil Nadu, and so on and so forth. Also, other states, in my Telegraph article, I quote what I think was a very significant statement by the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Jagan Mohan Reddy, a statement that, or two statements on similar lines that did not get the attention they deserved. Mr. Reddy, who, unlike Mr. Vijayan of Kerala or Mamata Banerjee of West Bengal or Stalin of Tamil Nadu, has not been confrontational with the centre and Mr. Modi before. Mr. Reddy has been pliant, compliant, has praised Mr. Modi, supported policies of the centre. Actually, went so far to say twice within a week earlier in February, I wish no party gets a majority in the next Lok Sabha elections, because then the rights of states like Andhra will be respected. States that are ruled by parties other than the BJP. So here you have a chief minister who does not have a past history of conflict and tension and collision with the BJP-led central government, worrying about this bulldozer steamroller approach. So I think to me, that was a very significant statement because of whom it came from.
Connected to Mr. Modi's attitude to federalism is also your fear, and this is a second fault line, of an emerging, increasing north-south divide. The northern states are largely ruled by the BJP with one or two exceptions. The southern states are completely outside the BJP's influence. Your fear is that the delimitation which is due in 2026 could lead not just to increasing divisions, but possibly creating fractures. Could you explain this a bit further?
So, if delimitation was last scheduled for 2001, and the government at the time sensibly kicked the can down the road for 25 years, now you have a situation in the last 25 years where the economic and social divergence between North and South has increased. Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Karnataka and Telangana are far more prosperous, and its populations far more progressive in social and cultural and economic and gender terms than UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, and so on. But their populations have been relatively stable, whereas the populations of the northern states have increased. So if there is delimitation, the northern states that already account for about 65% of the seats in the Lok Sabha, this proportion will increase further, which means, and one must be blunt about it. The policies of the central government will be determined by the more economically and socially regressive states of India. So things like Hindu majoritarianism, things like vigilante justice, which are not absent in the South, but are far more present in the North, will actually come and become much more part of how the state behaves and misbehaves. So what is the options? How do we conceive of a future for our republic, which is fairer to the southern states, the more progressive states? It could be the US model, where the Lok Sabha can go along with...
Let's not get to the solution. Let's stick today to the fear that you have.
Yes.
Are you worried
Yes.
that delimitation could actually create fractures?
The tension is already there and it will increase. So southern chief ministers and southern activists are already talking about a coalition of southern states. So that even though these are ruled by different governments, so you have Kerala ruled by the CPM, Tamil Nadu ruled by the DMK, Andhra ruled by the YSR Congress, and Telangana and my state Karnataka ruled by the regular Congress. There's already talk of having conversations so that they can present a united front to get fairer treatment from the center. Now, one of the consequences of the COVID pandemic, Karan, was that Modi and Amit Shah used the COVID pandemic to further centralize, in many ways, through the use of, the NIA, through the Disaster Management Acts, the fact that a new Ministry of Cooperatives was created so that state-run cooperatives would then be, overseen by the center. There's talk about shifting, some items on the concurrent list. The center wanted to play a more and more interventionist role, such as education. So all that is the COVID pandemic gave a handle to an already centralizing and authoritarian regime to further centralize and, in a sense, emasculate the states. And the southern states worry the most about this. Also, states like Punjab and the north, and so on. So it's not just the southern states. So I think these are things that are already there. And one last thing, Karan. And what we know of Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah is they don't go in for course correction. They never apologize. They never reconsider. They never incorporate dissident views and revise and refine their policies accordingly. They will go in further in their intimidation, in their arrogance, in their hostility to state governments that oppose them.
Now, a third concern that you write about in your Foreign Affairs article, and it's a particularly pressing one, is Hindutva. You say it aims to make Hindus fearful so as to compel them to act together and ultimately dominate those Indians who are not Hindus. In other words, you're going far further than the normal discourse about majoritarianism. You're talking of something that actually undermines Hindus themselves and makes them insecure and fearful.
I term it paranoid triumphalism, that the Muslims are, so there's talk about Muslims growing in disproportionately in population terms, which is not true. Indian Muslim population growth rates are also declining and stabilizing. There's talk about Christians being funded by missionaries from abroad, Sikhs by diaspora activists, and it's a fear that is created against the minorities. And you see it, for example, what's happened in Manipur or Haldwani, and more recently in the Punjab. So to repeat, it is Indian Muslims who bear the brunt of Hindutva prejudice and discrimination. But Sikhs and Christians are not immune from it either. So it's Hindus versus the rest. And on the model of what, shall we say, Pakistan may have done or Myanmar may have done, which is Buddhist versus the rest, hence the persecution of Rohingyas and also of the hill tribes of Myanmar. So this is the kind of ideology which is seen, which is intrinsic to the RSS. I mean, it's their core belief that minorities are to be suspected. You first suspect their bona fides have to be suspected. But also that ideology has been instrumentalized in electoral terms by the BJP under Modi and Shah by trying to create a vote bank of, as I argued by piece, 80% of the Hindus, which then becomes 48% of the vote. And, if you look at Manipur, Karan, it's been almost a year, and the conflict has got worse. The majoritarianism of the Métis is more stark, more naked, more weaponized, encouraged by the Home Minister and his agent there, the Chief Minister, Mr. Biren Singh, and Mr. Modi doesn't care. And on our borderlands, this kind of thing is happening. In Haldwani, in Uttarakhand, a state where I grew up in, where there was no previous history of Hindu-Muslim conflict of this kind. And the Muslims, the harassment and persecution of Muslims in Uttarakhand is unprecedented. In Punjab, which is a border state again. So I think they just do, so long as they win elections, they don't care for issues like safety and security and peace and stability.
Connected to all of this is the way Narendra Modi has consciously and deliberately breached the line that should divide religion and politics. You write, he has for the first time made Hindu rituals central to important secular occasions, such as the inauguration of a new parliament building, which was conducted by him alone, flanked by a phalanx of chanting priests, but with members of parliament, the actual representatives of the people, conspicuously absent. And then you add, as a result, Modi has become in symbol, if not in substance, the Hindu emperor of the present. In other words, what we're seeing is the steady Hinduification of Indian secular practice.
Indian state practice. Yes, and I think Mr. Modi does see himself as a kind of Hindu emperor, and many of his supporters do. Priest chanting Raja Sahib ki Jai, which has happened in Kashi, happened in Ayodhya. Even some of his admirers will have privately told me that they're disturbed by that. They welcome the Ram temple, but it should have been kept an occasion in which, there were rituals conducted by priests, and he was out of it. But he's not only breached the boundary between state and religion, between shall we say priestly authority and in the past, historically in Hindu kingdoms, the king enjoyed political power and the priest enjoyed spiritual authority. Now, Mr. Modi wants to take all of it because that's his style. And that presentation of himself as a kind of Hindu emperor in ceremonies, in parliament, and in the Ram temple, I think is what that says about the kind of brainwashing of a large section of the Indian population, that they welcome it, that they have forgotten the history of our freedom struggle, of our constitution, of what happens to other states when people start presenting them in this kind of as a kind of quasi-divine ruler with authority from the heavens, which is what Mr. Modi often claims. God has sent him for this, God has chosen him for that. I mean, it is at one level, of course, worthy of study by a psychiatrist, this kind of delusions of grandeur. But beyond that, it is deeply worrying for our life as citizens of a constitutional republic.
There is one aspect of your foreign affairs article that I think will come as a very significant surprise to most readers. And it's something they haven't realized, and certainly they haven't appreciated. It's to do with the environment. You write, when Modi came to power in 2014, India ranked 155 out of 178 countries assessed by the Environment Performance Index, which estimates the sustainability of a country's development in terms of the state of its air, water, soils, natural habitats, and so on. But, and this is the shocking part, by 2022, India ranked last, 180 out of 180. That's, I put it, disastrous. And most people have no idea of this.
Most people have no idea of that, of the consequences of environmental abuse, although they experience it every day in the cities of northern India, which are the most polluted in the world, in those who live by rivers that are biologically dead, by farmers who have to forage farther and further in search of water, who have to cope with the contamination of the soil, with the destruction of the forest. Now, human beings depend for sustenance on the gifts of nature. Without air, clean water, clean soil, and of course, you would not have access to such resources as wood, pasture, and so on. You would not have a functioning economy. So the varied forms of environmental degradation occurring in India due to a kind of rapacious form of economic development are affecting the lives of hundreds of millions of Indians. Farmers, their productivity is declining. Fisher folks, fish stocks are depleting and they're going out of work. Young kids in Delhi, infants have to use steroid inhalers because their asthma is so bad. Schools are shut across many parts of North India in the winter season. So the costs to our health, to our well-being, and our economy are colossal and are ignored not just by our policymakers, but by our scholars and intellectuals and
Okay.
economic columnists. And I think this is something which I have been worried about for a long time. I began life as an environmental scholar. And when I see what is going around in terms of the destruction of the environment, and I'd like to underline, this is happening independent of climate change. Climate change will make things worse because there'll be unpredictable floods, fires, cyclones, storms, droughts. And unless we wake up, I think you'll soon find that the costs will mount to such an extent that our future, not just as an economy, but as a society, will be in peril. And this is not apocalyptic talk. This is just look around you.
After 10 years of Modi, this seems to be the conclusion you've reached in that Foreign Affairs article. I'm quoting you. One party, the BJP, and within it, one man, the Prime Minister, are judged to represent India to itself and to the world. The result, you write, is Hindus impose themselves on Muslims. The central government imposes itself on the provinces. The state further curtails the rights and freedoms of citizens. Meanwhile, the unthinking imitation of Western models of energy-intensive and capital-intensive industrialization is causing profound and, in many cases, irreversible environmental damage. To me, and I imagine to the reader, this sounds like regression, not progress.
Yeah, but with one caveat. Many of these problems, such as the erosion of the autonomy of independent institutions, attacks on the press, degradation of the environment, increasing vulnerability of religious minorities, antedate Modi. So they have their origins in things that start in the 60s and 70s.
But he's made them worse.
He's made them much worse. And one consequence, I think, is because he enjoys a kind of parliamentary majority. He enjoys total dominance within his party. There's no feedback loop within the party at all. He can, cabinet ministers are utterly submissive. They compete with one another only in glorification and praise of the prime minister. So he's made them worse, and hence 5 more years of a BJP majority government. It's hard to say what will happen. I think that finally, these things run their course. Democratic and competitive politics will revive. People will begin.
We don't know. We don't know. Let's not start speculating. We don't know what will happen.
We don't know, but babe, look, Karan. When the British built the city you are in, New Delhi, they didn't think they'd be out of that imperial capital in 17 years. They didn't think that, right? So rulers and regimes that are in control, that are in power, tend to think they're immortal.
You've obviously been reading Shelley's Ozymandias, but there is a huge paradox that I want to end with. And the paradox is simple, but it's stark. The country loves Modi, and he's likely to be re-elected within a few weeks for a 3rd term.
Yes.
And you yourself write, Modi remains extremely popular. He is incredibly hardworking and politically astute. He's able to read the pulse of the electorate and adapt his rhetoric and tactics accordingly. Does this mean that we have a master politician and tactician ruling us, but with policies that are, in many instances, disturbing, divisive, and even, I imagine, potentially destructive?
Yeah, but Karan, let me end with, since you raised the question of his popularity. Part of the reason for his popularity is that the opposition has not been able to get its act together. And the main reason for the opposition not being able to get its act together is regrettably something I've spoken to you about in the past before, the fact that for the 3rd time in a row, Mr. Rahul Gandhi is presented as the default prime ministerial alternative to Mr. Modi. Now, give me 2 minutes and then I'll conclude. Now, here's a counterfactual. In my view, Mr. Rahul Gandhi is a decent man, but an ineffective and not very clever politician. But he's a decent man. And after the last electoral defeat, humiliating defeat in 2019, he stepped down as president of the Congress party. If at that stage, in late 2019, 3.5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I beg your pardon, the Congress had elected any non-dynast, any capable Congress politician who's clever, articulate, able, and does not carry the baggage of family. It could have been Gehlot, it could have been Pilot, it could have been Kharge, it could have been Siddaramaiah, it could have been Baghel. India would have been a happier place. There would have been a robust, integrated opposition led by a dynamic leader and not by an entitled dynast who's confused. Now, let me finish. So, but we are stuck with this. We are stuck with this, till what happens in May. But finally, after what happens in May, the Congress and the Gandhi family will wake up and India will survive Modi. I mean, I would like to assure those who, like me, detest majoritarianism, worry about the institutional, economic, and cultural future of our country. I would like to assure them that India can and must outlive Hindutva, majoritarianism, and the cult of personality, but that would require an alternative leadership in the opposition to what we now have.
But let me end by coming back to the key point that seems to be the conclusion of your insights revealed in that Foreign Affairs article. And that conclusion is this: we have a master politician and tactician ruling us, one who is enormously popular and extremely strong. But, and the but is important, the policies that he's implementing are in many instances disturbing, divisive, and potentially destructive. That's the paradox.
Yes.
Hugely popular man, but this very popular man could actually divide us and diminish us, and worse still, sap our strength.
Yes, because he's a master politician. He's clever, but diabolically so. He has been indoctrinated in an ideology of anger and hate and Hindu supremacy. He has, through his own political successes and the power of his personality, come to believe in himself as a kind of incarnation of as a kind of almost quasi-divine being, certainly as a kind of putative emperor of this vast, sprawling, diverse, and complicated land. And his party men have gone along with this belief. So it is a paradox. He is focused, hardworking, intelligent, shrewd, calculating, but yet driven by an ideology of hatred and by an arrogant disregard of not just the interests of Indians who are opposed to him, but an arrogant disregard of healthy and constructive criticism. So that is the and other countries have gone through that. Again, I'd like to, I'm just reading a book on Mussolini, who was incredibly popular in the Italy of the 1930s. If you read the literature about Mussolini in Italy, you will be starkly reminded of what is happening. It will have such echoes and resonances, which is what is happening in India today. So, but fortunately, we are much more diverse than Italy was, or Putin's Russia is. So, although as someone who stands for pluralism, diversity, democracy, accommodation, non-violence, I am disturbed by what is going on. I often say I'm depressed but not despairing. There will be a course correction, maybe not in the next election, but hopefully within our lifetimes.
This is my last question. This entire interview was to discuss that key core thought in your Foreign Affairs article that Modi's supremacy could be a danger to India's success and development, to the fulfillment of India's potential. Let me ask you, does this mean Modi is dangerous?
Yes, in the same way as Indira Gandhi was dangerous. But Indira Gandhi also went. And after she went, you had a revival of democratic politics. You had a renewal of the independence of institutions. You had a flourishing of a free press of the kind India had not seen. So we have been through this before, and we have come out of it. Indira Gandhi was also incredibly popular, and you and I are old enough to remember that. So it is worrying that his dominance, the strength of his personality, his authoritarian ways, the majoritarian ideology of his party are all worrying and disturbing. But hopefully we'll come out of it.
Ram Guha, thank you very much indeed. Many people will sit up and ask themselves that question that you posed in the Foreign Affairs article many, many times. The question was, could Modi's supremacy, by which we mean his personality and his style of governance, as well as the policies he's following, end up being a danger for India? We've come to the conclusion that the answer to that question is yes. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.